like I said, I'm gonna try to make these things regular. Yeah, so these are again unsolved mysteries. Was reading something interesting earlier today. Actually, there's two things. One, actually, both of them are are lengthy, but they're interesting. So wanted to go over them. And again, want to, I guess, caution because some of the details in these articles are gruesome. So if you're not up for it, I would say please understand what's about to happen as I read this stuff off. But otherwise, yeah, these are some stories. This one seems a little bit more. One seems recent. I'm going to do two today. I guess depending on how long it takes. As we can see, it is 12:40, so a little bit earlier than last night, but still, still late at the end of the day. But yeah, no, we're gonna get into these mysteries. See if we can discover them. One thing I realized yesterday, I probably should have, because some of these are coming from Reddit, and sh- should have read the comments on one of them. And but do if you do like the content, like subscribe. But let's go ahead and get into it. The first one starts. It's a woman who escaped a violent domestic situation with her young son and suddenly starts exhibiting weird behaviors. When her mother returns home after a few hours, all of her daughter's belongings are gone, and she and her son are nowhere to be found. Where are Sophia and Mateo Van Dam? And this looks pretty recent. This seems to be in 2023. So yeah, this is going to be a doozy. Okay, some background. Sophia Van Dam was 20 when she went missing with her son Mateo, who was 2, from Beaufort, Sumter County, South Carolina. Okay, so from the U.S. Sophia grew up in Beaufort as the youngest of 5. She graduated from Battery Creek High School a year early when she was pregnant with her son, and then she went on to obtain a welding certification. At 16, Sophia had ran away from home, but Desiree Peavy, her sister, said that she was free to return anytime she need or want. Teresa Van Dam, Sophia's mother, said that ever since then, her daughter has had a tendency to spend time with the wrong crowd. Okay. Sophia lived in Sumter with her son and her boyfriend, Jonas Jerry Washington, who was 24, for a few months before she and her son went missing. The neighbors said that the Van Dams were quiet and kept to themselves. They sometimes saw Sophia mowing the front lawn while little Mateo would run around and play on the porch. Now hold up. They said Mateo was 2 when he went missing, right? Okay. Sophia and Jonas' relationship had allegedly gotten violent in the past. Jonas Jr. is currently under arrest on unrelated charges. Teresa described her daughter as very bright, very smart, and very street smart, bubbly, a leader, and said that she liked to make people laugh. Her grandson was very inquisitive and wants to be outside and to explore. Okay, so now the disappearance. It says on June 4th, Sophia called Teresa to explain to her that something had happened between her and her boyfriend and that she wanted to stay at her family home in Beaufort with Mateo. There are also records that show that the police responded to a domestic call that came from the Sumter home that day. Weeks before that, however, Sophia asked during a phone call with Teresa if her parents would be okay if she called them in the middle of the night and said that she needs to come home. Teresa last saw Sophia and Mateo on 1 a.m. of the 21st of June. Sophia appeared confused, and she would do things like repeating what she just said multiple times. Teresa wanted to take her to a hospital on a suspicion of a psychotic breakdown, but Sophia refused. When Teresa came home at 3:30, both her daughter and her grandson were gone. The doors were locked, and all of their items were gone, and the house was in disarray. Stop right there. So we know the boyfriend, it seems like the boyfriend is abusive from what we're reading. And either he took them or they had to get away. But let's continue. The last contact Teresa had with Sophia was a text conversation on the 24th of June. Teresa said that her daughter was saying crazy things, which attributed to the recent turbulence in her daughter's life. However, she also speculated that Sophia might have been under the influence of drugs, and she was talking out of her mind. In the conversation, Sophia said that she was coming back to her home in Sumter. Okay. Desiree, I believe Desiree is the sister. No, is Desiree the sister? Yeah, Desiree is her sister. Desiree said that all calls to her sister have been going to voicemail since the 26th of June. She noted that it was unusual as Sophia was known to have a phone at hand. The last ping from Sophia's cell phone was registered near Santee Cooper Lake on Interstate 95. They say it's most likely Lake Marion. When the investigators arrived at Sophia's home on the 28th of June to perform a wellness check requested by her mother, Teresa, they discovered that her car was still in the driveway. It was taken into police custody for forensic testing. Mateo's car seat was also found in the car. When they knocked on the doors, however, nobody answered. A neighbor said that the last time he saw anyone in Sophia's car, it was a group made up of two guys and a little kid, but they noted that the child didn't look like Mateo. It's not clear when the sighting took place. Jonas Jr. was arrested on the 30th of June on unrelated charges for fleeing to evade arrest, trespassing, and being a fugitive from justice related to a 2021 charges in Beaufort County for possessions of a weapon and a commission of a violent crime, kidnapping, larceny, and burglary related to alleged carjacking. He was out on bail for 2021 charges. In August, hey, I'll stop at Baby Alexis. Thanks for following. I appreciate the follow. In August, a property that belonged to Jonas' father was searched. Jonas Jr. isn't considered a suspect, and he had no idea why his property was even searched. Now, I'll stop there. His property was searched because of your previous record, and that's pretty clear. But now, the interesting part is, and it says the conclusion, before I get to that, the interesting part is that the car seat was still in the car, Jonas is still there, but the mom is gone too. Sophia's gone and Mateo's gone. So this is where the issue is going to become. Because we're going to think that he killed him basically. I feel like the way the timeline was relayed for this case was very confusing. This is the author. They're just giving their take on it, with the dates changing between sources and different details mixed up with each other. They did their best to make sense of it, but they wanted to see if they say, please tell them if there was a mistake. It says Sophia's poor mental state shortly before she went missing is worrying them. There hasn't been anything said about her having a mental illness. Teresa seemed to be concerned for her well-being, which suggests it was something that happened at random and not something like an attack of mental illness her family knew about. I wonder if something happened that triggered the decline of Sophia's mental health, like a phone call with Jonas. Teresa seems to believe he was involved. Of course, it's possible that Sophia's sudden onset didn't have anything to do with a sudden situation, and more just overall stress she was under at that time. They also say pure speculation here, but they also wonder if Sophia might have been a drug user. That could be something, but still, it depends on what type of drug it would be, because then Mateo, I don't understand why Mateo's gone too. Sophia was a drug user, and that caused her to behave strangely. It was kind of implied by Teresa, but only when she was referring to Sophia after she went missing. It's possible she was taking drugs while she was still in the family home. The author says they don't intend to say this to judge Sophia, but just to consider a scenario that might have taken place. They also state it's hard to wonder if Jonas didn't have anything to do with the disappearance of Sophia and Mateo. We know that the relation got relationship gotten physical in the past, and some kind of conflict between them was the reason why Sophia and Mateo moved to Sophia's parents in the first place. There doesn't seem to be any specific details to the link of the disappearance of Jonas and of their disappearance and Jonas Jr., or at least none that they know about. I wonder if the sighting of strange people in Sophia's car after she went missing had anything to do with Jonas Jr. Hmm. Yeah, and then it kind of stops there. Yeah, this would be interesting for me. I feel like Jonas. Just reading this, you would assume Jonas knows something. Now I don't know if there's drug use involved. He should know something if she was declining mentally, because parents at the end of the day, they want the best for, well, good parents, I'll say good parents want the best for the child at the end of the day, so they'll always have them in a higher regard. But the friends, well, typically the family does know. Sometimes they try to overlook it. All right, let's read what some of these comments on Reddit say. It says, from what I remember reading in another write-up of this case, Sophia's phone last pinged off a cell tower near a huge lake. I wonder how thoroughly that area and water has been searched. Somebody does state that it still seems like an active case, so they probably would. But then somebody said else also mentions that that water is full of gators. If they were to fall or jump or be pushed from any of their bridges, nothing would be left of them. Somebody says, yes, the phone last pinged by a large lake. Someone on Web Sleuth said there was a bridge on it that it either was unused or very rarely used. I think that the lake is a good place to search. Usually I would think of a case of someone driving their car into a body of lake on purpose or by accident. But the problem about that is Sophia's car is accounted for. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, this is an interesting dilemma. Yeah, because on one hand, you have people thinking that she might have been on drugs or some form of intoxication, allegedly. And then you have the boyfriend. Let me see. Where they say there's domestic disputes. I wonder if they do say abuse in here at all. Let me see. Did they say abuse at all? No, just domestic. So, okay. Well, I would assume a domestic abuse, use some inference skills to get that. But the thing is, she was at the home 1 a.m., and I believe this is 2023, according to the author. And then she just leaves and is gone. That's, yeah, that's tough. That's tough. Again, it's like all these scenarios right now that I'm reading right now have to deal with kids, and this one basically a grandma having to wonder, where where the kids are, and now I got to wonder where the grandkid is, and hopefully he's okay too. So hopefully she just, I guess the best case scenario would be she ran away from home and is living somewhere else. And hopefully the worst has not come for Sophia or Mateo, especially Mateo being so young. But that is one story. Now the second one I wanted to go over is actually titled Bible John. Yeah, wanted to get into this because this is part of some unsolved cases from might be in a while ago though. So I'll read it and I'll see if there's any news or if there's any updates as I'm going through it. But it is titled Bible John. Starts off, Patricia. She needed a break from her busy routine. By 1968, Patricia had a full life, married, mother of a toddler, and working as a nurse at a large hospital in Glasgow, Scotland, all at the age of 25. Because her husband was a Royal Air Force corporal stationed in England, she and her son had been living with her parents for a while. They had been happy to look after their grandson when necessary in the past, and so Patricia asks if they mind looking after him the night of February 22nd as she decided to go out for an evening. Some of her friends like to go to the city's Barrowland Ballroom on Thursday nights, when the popular dance hall catered specifically to those aged 25 and up. An evening with friends, dancing, and it says some innocent flirting might be just what she needed. Patricia put one of those nice outfits on, fixed her hair, makeup, and walked out into the darkening streets of Glasgow. In Douglas Skelton's 1992 book, Blood on a Thistle, Skelton states that Patricia first went to another dance hall, the Majestic, before going to the Barrowland later that evening. Patricia didn't stand out in the Barrowland crowd that night, so it's difficult to retrace her movements or identify all her dance partners. Some people later remembered her being at both dance halls, but they could not provide details, apparently. However, she was escorted home by someone she'd met at Barrowland. Okay, so that's interesting start. Let's see how this goes. As the sun rose on the morning of Friday the 23rd, the cabinet maker headed off to work and noticed something strange lying along the side of a tranquil lane on his route. Looking closer, he was horrified to see or find the dead body of a naked woman and ran off to alert authorities. Arriving on the scene, police quickly determined that a young woman had been dead for several hours and that she had been strangled with her own pantyhose. Oh, wow. But a quick search of the area determined that none of the rest of the woman's clothing or any personal belongings were nearby, leading detectives to theorize that she had been killed somewhere else and the body had been dumped in the lane. Patricia's parents had the unfortunate task of identifying the body, which had been left just yards away from their house. That's terrible. Police questioned the local residents and scoured the area for Patricia's clothes and handbag. They even sent drivers in the cold water nearby the river cart, but none of her belongings were recovered. One neighbor told police that she thought she heard cries for help early hours of February 23rd, but this information was too vague to be of any value to the investigation. When the police learned that the journalist had hosted a party the night of the 22nd near the crime scene, they talked with the reporters, the photographers who attended, hoping they would have been more naturally observant than most, but no new leads were generated. A photograph of a policewoman wearing clothing similar to Patricia's was circulated in the area in hopes that somebody would remember seeing her after she left the dance hall. But the investigation went nowhere. Although detectives weren't aware at this time, Glasgow was just beginning to add another dark chapter to the city's shadowy history. Yeah, this seems like it's about to get dark real quick. Yeah, oof. Okay. Although the city's name comes from a Gaelic... Oh, I'm sorry, let's reread that. Glasgow. Although the city's name comes from the Gaelic for green hollow, there's little of the area's pastoral origins left in the bustling industrial hub along the River Clyde. Ooh, that was a tough read. Maybe I need to increase the size of the words real quick. Act like I can't read. Over time, the city developed into a metropolis that can now boast cultural gems such as the Gallery of Modern Art and McClellan's Galleries, prestigious museums and universities, the Glasgow Botanic Gardens and Royal Scottish National Orchestra, and multiple architectural masterpieces created by native son Charles Rennie Mackintosh. But lights so bright must by definition cast shadows, and the city also holds, as journalist Russell Ledbetter wrote in the city's Evening Times, no shortage of thugs, murderous villains, and petty thieves. A quick tour through darker side of Glasgow's past reveals notable crimes and criminals such as Madeline Smith, brought to trial in 1857 for the alleged poisoning of her foreign-born lover, Emily L. Engler, while he threatened to expose their affair as she was preparing to marry a wealthy suitor. Emily had kept her love letters, which, when read aloud, caused a scandal in the Victorian courtroom, and those letters certainly proved motive, but the prosecution could not prove opportunity, and Madeline was acquitted under the unique Scottish verdict of not proven. Dr. Edward William Pritchard. Pritchard's wife seemed to be struck by a mysterious illness while at home, but recovered nicely when out of his presence. After he killed his wife off and her visiting mother, just for good measure, with the easily hidden poison antimony, the anonymous letter persuaded the authorities to exhume both bodies, which resulted in an 1865 trial that gave the good doctor the claim to fame of being the last person to be executed in public in Scotland. Ooh, yeah. Ooh, okay. Where's this Glasgow? My goodness. Glasgow does not seem like a good place to be. It seems like they're poisoning people. Okay. Continuing Glasgow's dark side. Oscar Slater. An obvious miscarriage of justice was done when Slater was convicted of the bludgeoning death of an elderly Glasgow woman in 1908. Slater did not resemble the clear descriptions of the murderer provided by eyewitnesses, and the guilty verdict even drew the ire of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote a book in defense of Slater, who was eventually cleared of all charges, nearly 20 years in prison. That would suck if I did not do it. Archibald Hall. This Glasgow native rose from his humble birth in 1924 to working as a butler to some of Britain's elite. He would eventually murder, oh my goodness, some wealthy former employers, and then continue to killing his girlfriend for not wanting to let Hall pawn some stolen jewelry, and his brother, jeez man, for asking Archibald too many questions about where his money came from, before being sentenced to life in imprisonment, of course. Ian Brady. Born in Glasgow slums in 1938, Brady would pair up later in life with the late Mira Hindley, and the two would commit a series of killings between 1963 through 65, known as the Moors murders. Peter Manuel, in his short life in 1958, at the age of 32, he became the last person to be hanged in Glasgow. Manuel killed at least 8 and committed numerous burglaries and assaults, brought to trial several times during his adulthood, and he was a master at skillfully providing his own defense in court and escaped conviction more than once. He shifted blame from himself so skillfully that the innocent widower of one of his first victims was temporarily jailed on suspicion of having committed Manuel's crime. That's crazy. His sociopathic audacity developed over time, and after killing a family of 3 over a New Year's holiday in 1957-1958, he returned to the house frequently to rest up, help himself to holiday leftovers, and drive around the family car. He was even considerate enough to feed the murdered family's cat whenever he made one of his visits. Oh, he was crazy for real. This is a truce. Ooh, man, there's some crazy people in this world. Okay. If Glasgow breathed a sigh of relief after Manuel's execution, the respite from a serial killer lasted only 10 years, until the corpse of a young mother named Patricia was found dumped along a quiet street. Whew, jeez. Okay. All right. I wonder why it's called Bible. This is called Bible John. I'm interested in knowing that. A year and a half passed since Patricia's body was found near her parents' home, and most of Glasgow had forgotten about the brutal, unsolved murder. The crime was the last thing on their mind when Jemima, a 32-year-old mother of 3, on the evening of August 16, 1969, like Patricia before her, Jemima was looking forward to an evening at the Barrowland Ballroom and left her kids and with her sister, Margaret, for the night. According to Alan Crow and Peter Sampson's book, Bible John, Hunt for a Killer, Jemima arrived at the Barrowland and engaged in a ritual then popular with young women to preserve the heavily sprayed hairstyles of the time. Whatever that spray was, they probably get their hair to stick in that style. Jemima traveled across town with a scarf covering her hair, and upon arriving at the dance hall, went immediately to the ladies' room to remove her curlers and make her final adjustments to her makeup before going to the main dance floor. Other dancers that evening noticed that Jemima spent much of the night dancing with a tall man in a blue suit. He appeared to be in his late 20s or early 30s, was neat in appearance, and had a short, fair-colored hair. In the early hours of the 17th, several Glaswegians, out for a stroll noticed Jemima and the same man slowly walking away from Barland and into the night. Ooh, jeez. And this was, they say, 10 years later? Whew, man, you really got to know people. Margaret was puzzled when Jemima hadn't come by to pick up her children early the morning of August 17th. Whew. As the day wore on, she began to worry, and her anxiety distracted her to the point that she did not initially hear the neighborhood kids outside her window talking about a grisly discovery they made nearby in an abandoned building. Once paying attention and fearing for the worst, Margaret asked one of the children for directions to their find, and soon discovered Jemima's body in the derelict building. Unlike Patricia, Jemima was fully clothed. However, like the earlier victim, she had been strangled by her own nylons. Her handbag was missing, and her body was found near her home. Additionally, when the police compared the two cases, they discovered another similarity. Patricia and Jemima had both been menstruating at the time they died. Okay, that's different. Police, excuse me, I feel like I was about to sneeze. Police did an investigation of the area and tried to question those who had attended Barland on the night of the 16th, which proved difficult, as some of Jemima's fellow dancers were married and had told their spouses they were going elsewhere before sneaking off to Barland. Oh, okay. I see what's going on here. Skelton states that on the evening of the 19th, police had the music stopped and made official plea for information from the stage. Additionally, Jemima's 6 siblings offered a reward of 100, I believe it's pounds, for information leading to an arrest, but no suspects came to light. Yeah, I don't know if 100 pounds would get it done, but I guess it's a different time too. Maybe 100 pounds is a lot, but I have a feeling it's not. Okay, with no solid leads in sight, the police stepped up the investigation. In an attempt to jog the public's memory, a policewoman who closely resembled the dead woman dressed in similar clothing retraced Jemima's last known steps. This yielded a few additional clues, but did not lead the police to a particular suspect. A rough sketch of the man seen leaving Barland with Jemima was created, and for the first time, a Scottish murder investigation, police released a sketch to the media. Drawings of the suspect had traditionally been distributed solely within the police organization. Before the investigation had a chance to cool down, another murder gave police the solid lead they needed, a living witness who shared a taxi with both the killer and his next victim. All right, going into the story now. Getting an early start on Halloween festivities, 20-year-old Helen decided to spend the evening of October 30th, 1969 at the Barland Ballroom. I'm going to stop there. I don't know if I'd be going to this Barland after hearing, I feel like there should be, man, they should find another hall to dance at. I mean, like, all right. The first person, okay. After that second person, yeah, I ain't dancing here no more. I don't care if it's 10 years later or not. But all right, let's keep going. All right, get back to Helen. Okay, so her husband offered to stay home with their 2 young boys, but warned his wife to be careful. Helen brushed off his concerns. Oh, Lord. She wasn't worried about the recent murder linked to the dance hall because she wouldn't be alone. She was with her sister Jean and was confident they would be safe together. Oh, Lord. Skelton recounts that Helen partnered with a tall young man during the evening, according to her sister Jean, and the two danced exclusively together. Around midnight, Jean and Helen prepared to go home, and Helen's new friend offered to see them home in a taxi. Skeleton and Crow, Skeleton and Crow and Samson tell different versions of this brief cab ride that will haunt Jean for the rest of her days. Both books agree that during the cab ride, Jean learned that the man's name was John, and he told them about his history. A story that police would later ask Jean to recall in as much detail as possible. Jean remembered that John mentioned having a sister and claimed that they had been raised in such strict religious household that he was still able to easily quote passages of scripture. John also mentioned that while he played golf poorly, he had a cousin who had recently hit a hole in one. Skeleton states that the taxi ride ended without incident. After Jean was dropped off at home, she watched the taxi take Helen and John off into the early hours of Halloween. Okay, I thought she was gonna stay with her. Oh man, I see why this haunts Jean now. Crow and Sampson paint a more sinister picture of this cab ride, stating that John seemed upset at not being alone with Helen and resented Jean's presence. John spoke darkly of the evil woman who went to places like Barlin and completely ignored Jean for the latter half of the ride, including refusing to acknowledge her when she bid him goodbye. Regardless of how amiable John was during Jean's trip home, her farewell glance at her sister through the cab window was the last known sighting of Helen, until a man walking his dog Halloween morning came across what he thought was a pile of discarded rags on the street. Looking closer, he discovered Helen's fully clothed body, and he ran to get help. Like in earlier victims, Helen had been strangled by her own pantyhose, and her handbag had been taken. What is up with this dude in handbags and the pantyhose thing? I guess there's no thing about these serial killers. Jeez. And as with Patricia and Jemima, Helen had been having her period at the time of her death. I think I see what's going on here. And this time the killer removed her sanitary napkin and tucked it into one of Helen's armpits. This dude is weird. Unlike the earlier crimes, however, the killer had left two identifiable clues: a bite mark on Helen's body and a semen stain on her clothing. Although only limited use could be made of those at the time, they were preserved and came into play decades later. Decades later? We still can. At this time, it had to be 2 decades because it was a decade before. Was it Patricia and I'm forgetting the other girl's name? Patricia and Jemima. Patricia and Jemima. It was a decade between them, and then you have Helen, and you tell me it's still a decade later before we find this guy? Ooh, okay. Jean was questioned thoroughly about John, and police released massive amount of information in hopes of getting the public's help in tracking down the killer. His ability to quote scripture was picked up by reporters who dubbed the killer Bible John, a nickname that haunted Glasgow for years to come. I'm just telling you right now, if I lived in Glasgow, I'd be moving, especially if I'm a woman. Seems like he doesn't attack men, but I would be gone. Okay. So it said, all right, so right here is talking about similarities in these cases. As I need to slow down. Good Lord, that was terrible. As Crow and Sampson point out, there were multiple similarities with 3 victims. All 3 had spent the last night of their lives at Barlin Ballroom, which again they would need to close down. All 3 were strangled by their own nylons. Each body was left in a very close proximity to the victim's house. The handbags of all 3 were taken after the murder, possibly as souvenirs. All 3 victims were menstruating. I wonder if he was killing them because of that. All 3 were seen leaving Barlin with a man of similar description, and which the CID distributed to the newspapers after Helen's murder. The man was anywhere between 25 to 30, medium build, about 6 foot tall, short, light reddish hair with blue-gray eyes, one tooth in the upper right of his mouth that overlaps another tooth, a military-style wristwatch band. Only thing is, if you put that out to everybody, wouldn't he get it too, and then just switch up the style? Well, the 6 foot he couldn't do with, but I don't know. We got to keep reading. Although the New York Daily News stated that the lead investigator in the case had dismissed Bible John as a media creation and further claimed that the police never really thought there was one man who killed 3 times, what is known that the investigation seems to strongly indicate that after Helen's murder, the Glasgow police did believe in some connection between the 3 crimes, and in fact, they initiated a multifaceted investigation that was arguably the largest the city had ever seen. I would say the New York Daily News even got into it. That's kind of crazy. All right. A color portrait based on the witness's description was created by a member of Glasgow's School of Art and widely circulated in the Glasgow's area. Skelton narrates one rare comical point of the investigation involving the creation of this portrait. While being interviewed, one witness commented that a dog walking nearby had hair color that was nearly exact match to Bible John's. For the sake of authenticity, officers chased the startled dog through the streets until they cornered it and clipped a sample of the dog's hair to use by the portrait for use by the portrait artist. The portrait generated more than 4,000 tips from people who claim they saw or knew the man pictured. Some men who bore an unfortunate resemblance to the portrait eventually carried cards issued by the police stating that they had been seen or questioned and cleared of their crimes. Helen's husband made a public appeal for the killer to turn himself in. Oh, okay. Not to be insensitive, but that's not that. Like, the killer's not doing that. Crow and Sampson further relate that he also offered a reward that accounted for most of his life savings. Now, that I feel would help find him. The reward, yeah, because I would just need to know for closure. The BBC aired a recreation of Helen's final night using a policewoman as a stand-in and a man who had once been brought in for questioning, due to his strong resemblance to the portrait of the killer, but few leads were generated. After Helen's murder, a man came forward who said that he'd been on a nearly deserted bus in the early hours of Halloween when a disheveled-looking young male with scratches on his face boarded the bus and then later got off at a stop on Gray Street. Police searched the areas for clues and for the men matching Bible John's description, but they came up empty. While dealing with the overwhelming public response, at one point more than 100 police officers were working on the case and more than 50,000 statements were collected. Police also performed numerous interviews of bus drivers and taxi drivers, and younger officers began going undercover to Barrowland, pretending to be fun-loving dancers out for a night on the town, looking for likely suspects who matched Jean's description of the man she and Helen had shared the taxi with. Yeah, I guess he's been there 3 times at this point, so yeah, he should be back. But the thing is, I wonder, because if all 3 of these women were murdered because they was on their period, because that's what it seems like, you would have to, yeah, it would be tough. Jean's description also led police to focus a part of their investigation on armed forces and possibly even their own, as John's short haircut may have indicated his belonging to a branch of the military. I didn't even think about that. Additionally, police questioned dentists about male patients who had an overlapping tooth, and golf courses throughout the country were contacted to see if John's story about a cousin recently making a hole-in-one could be used to track down the killer. At Glasgow, newspaper brought in a Dutch psychic who had been helpful in similar cases in the past, and Crow and Sampson state that by being told only Helen's name, age, and location of her body, the psychic was able to draw a detailed map of Glasgow's neighborhood, and that was later searched without result. Okay, so she, okay. Skelton reported that in the middle of the 1970s, a Glasgow psychiatrist produced an early profile stating that Bible John would most likely appear friendly, but somewhat prudish. The psychiatrist theorized that Bible John liked to go to the movies by himself and read topics ranging from the Third Reich to sorcery. Okay. Jean was called into police station more than 250 times to view suspects that matched her description, but she was unable to positively identify Bible John. Although the investigation continued, no arrests were made. Bible John and the three murdered women faded from the public eye as the new decade began. Okay. Although only the murders of Patricia, Jemima, and Helen were officially attributed to a man known as Bible John, similar crimes were theorized to have been committed by the same killer. A 1977 murder, for example, brought Bible John's specter back to the public eye because the victim had spent her last evening at a Glasgow dance hall and was found strangled without her handbag. I'm not going to dance halls. If I'm in Glasgow at this time, I'm not going to a single I'm moving. Forget that. I'm moving. Kerwin Sampson reported that in 1983, a well-to-do Glasgow man hired a private investigator to try and track down an old childhood friend whom he thought resembled the artist's depiction of Bible John. The investigators eventually found the man in question living in Holland, and after being questioned, the man was cleared, so we still didn't find him. A man known as John M. was one of the men who had been a suspect in the original investigations and who had been paraded before Jean for possible identification. His resemblance to the police sketch was remarkable, and as the years went on, despite the fact that less and less effort was spent on the three murders as time went on, John M. continued to be considered a prime suspect, and his name continued to come up in the investigation even after he committed suicide in 1980. So, still not finding this guy. Good Lord. And by this time, this is like 30 years later, John looks like a different person. He don't even look like the same guy. By the late 1990s, forensic criminology had progressed to a point not dreamed of in the late 1960s. And Glasgow police wanted to use that bite mark on Helen's body, and more specifically the semen left on her clothing, to test for possible match to John M., obtaining an inconclusive result on a DNA test using a sample from one of John M.'s siblings, and the police began to process the request of exhumation on John M.'s body. Looks like we are not really getting anywhere with this, to be honest with you. Okay. In February of 1996, Marie Cassidy of Glasgow University supervised the removal of John M.'s body from its grave and took samples from DNA for DNA comparison to the evidence remaining for Helen's crime scene. Cassidy told Daily Record that she was certain that the test will leave no doubt whether whether this is Bible John or not. I'm gonna say it's probably not, but let's read. And showed her complete confidence in the procedure she would be directing. If DNA testing had been around in the days of Jack the Ripper, things would have been very different. Let me drink some water, because obviously the boy can't speak right now. Regrettably, the media splashed John M.'s name and history all over Scotland, forcing his family into the unwanted spotlight, with his children and relatives being hounded for statements before testing had been completed. Numerous acquaintances from John M.'s past gave interviews whether they thought he could have been a killer, and his life was examined under a microscope, with every shortcoming being trumpeted in headlines. Similarly, Helen's husband was interviewed on February 5th, 1996 by the Daily Record, and decreed that the most recent portrayal of his wife, painted by some of the media as a tart that hurts the most. She was a terrific mom and a vivacious girl. Yeah, I was going to say tart sounds like a negative connotation, so it's like that's kind of messed up. Unfortunately, the promise for the swift test results wasn't as swift as they hoped. It wasn't until July 5th that the Daily Record reported that Scotland's top law officer confessed DNA tests failed to link John M. to semen stains found to Helen's clothing or prove that he made the bite mark on her wrist. Yeah, I was going to say this because I'm thinking Bible John is not going to kill himself. He probably moved somewhere else if I take a guess. The following day, the Daily Mail published a statement made by Jean where she claimed she always knew John M. was not Helen's killer, and she repeatedly told Strathclyde police they suspected the wrong man. That sucks. The New York Daily News reported that even before DNA testing was completed, several newspapers have flatly concluded that John M. was Bible John. When the DNA evidence showed he was innocent, the government apologized to the man's family. That is terrible. John M. was quietly reburied, and the investigation went nowhere for 8 years. Yeah, so we did all that. Bring out a man. Basically, the man killed himself. Oh, wow. Okay, hold on. It says, in December 2004, the hunt for Bible John came back into the headlines as the Sunday Mail reported that DNA taken from a person connected to a recent Glasgow crime scene was an 80% match for that found on Helen's clothing. The police have not released the name of the DNA source, probably not wanting to repeat their same media circus that swarmed John M.'s families for several years earlier, although it does appear that the focus of the Bible John investigation is on the 2004 person's older male relatives. In May 2005, the New York Daily News reported that Glasgow's police are actively collecting DNA samples from the family, and a policeman spokesman has stated confidently that science will solve these killings. We have no doubt of that. Overall, Bible John's notoriety may have diminished in recent years, as sadly, more horrific crimes have superseded Bible John's spree. If the current forensic tests prove conclusive, it may have some closure to the family and friends of the victims, but the lore and legacy of that dance hall killer will live on. Entering the realm of folklore, he has become something that some parents use as a boogeyman to get children to behave. That would get me to behave right there. Not gonna lie. He was the basis for Ian Rankin's 1999 detective novel Black and Blue. The singer-songwriter Shane MacGowan is said planning a song about the murder for the inclusion of the upcoming release. Bible John's hunting ground, Barlin Ballroom, is the sole survivor of the crime spree. It successfully shook off any negative association. I don't know how it did that. It had with the killings and is alive and well and is. Wait a second. It had with the killings and is alive and well and is at its website proudly announced the best rock venue in Scotland. Okay. Wow. I wonder. Okay, so wow, I can't believe the dance hall is still even active. Let me see something. I need to. What I need to work on is learning how to share my screen on here because this is absolutely insane. Okay, two things I want to look up. I want to see if Bible John is still around. If they still, I have to go on the wiki. I go on wiki to see if anything. And then that dance hall, the Glasgow. What was that dance hall again? Let me find the name of that dance hall. Cause that's absolutely insane. The Barrowland Ballroom, is that really still up? I feel like they should have been closed down or renamed or something. No way. No way they're still up and running like nothing's ever happened. Yeah, still up. Still active even till this day. Wow. Yep. And doesn't I wonder how much money they must make a lot of money at this place. And I wonder still that would be a place I couldn't go. Just for the horror stories. And my thing is, especially as a single woman or a woman going by myself, I wouldn't be able to leave with anybody. That would be my thing. If I left with somebody, I couldn't leave with anybody. I would have to go with somebody and only go back with that person. Like if you don't, I would follow them wherever they go. All right, let's see if we found this. Let's see if they found this guy. No, it's still on. I think it's still ongoing. Yeah, they said they have potential suspects. I'm just going off of Wikipedia now. Oh, I do want to give credit to this, to who wrote this. Douglas McGowan is the author of Bible John, which I just spoke about. I do want to give him some light. But okay, it's still, according to Wikipedia, still an ongoing investigation. They do have some suspects. It says potential suspects: John Edgar, John White. I think they said, but the problem was he didn't have the overlapping teeth, from what I'm reading. They said he was arguing with a woman at the Barrowland, but it doesn't seem like Baba John argues with you at the Barrowland. It seems he takes you in a taxi, but people probably didn't taxi anymore. Probably been an Uber now. But that was in 2005. Well, 2005 people were still in taxis. But he would have been older at this point. He would have been 30 years older. So if he was 20 when he first did it, he would have been 50 at that point. And then he would have been 60. Yeah, he should be an older guy at this point. David Henderson, this says another guy. Why they eliminate him? They said Henderson didn't look like the killer. They said a lady named Hannah Martin said she had been R-worded by Bible John. Man, it's crazy how people can go around and be like this. Whew. And I honestly think he did it because these women were on their period. The reason he killed them. And I guess the purses, I would have to talk to somebody about, I would honestly need to talk to somebody about this to understand why he would. The purses were a trophy, I guess? Maybe, I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of. I wouldn't know why he would feel the need to take the purses and then he would dump them out into the street. It seems like all of them, or dump them somewhere. So, man, this is crazy. And then you still don't. And by this time, he's an old man. If he's still alive, he's an old man, and he doesn't. More than likely, he doesn't resemble anything what he used to look like. So it's gonna be tough to find him if he's still even living in Glasgow or Scotland. So, but I'm gonna stop there. These are two stories I was gonna do tonight. I'm gonna try to stay consistent with this. If you like this type of content, please let me know. If you have stories that you'd like me to talk about, let me know. Or if you have something you'd like me to read while I'm on here, let me know. And I can do that too. But hey, everybody, have a good night, and have a great night. All right.